This episode is brought to you by Iams Pet Food. When you choose Iams dry dog or cat food, you can see a difference in your pet with your own eyes. Healthy energy in 5 days, healthy digestion in 10 days, and healthy skin and coat in just 25 days. Satisfaction for you and them. Guaranteed or your money back. Feed Iams dry dog or cat food and see a visible difference. Visit iams.com/difference to learn more.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining Pod Maverick. I'm Kirk Henderson. You know that Josh and I run this show. This is a special episode that I wanted to share during the holidays in case you needed something else to listen to. Obviously, you have both podcasts from the Knicks game where the Mavericks beat the pants off of them on ESPN. But I like sharing this one around the holidays because it's something extra and it's a fun look back. This show is from the night the Dallas Mavericks drafted Luka Doncic. Since it's Luka's 7th season, we're getting well past 6-ish years since this show was recorded. It's a bit of a silly listen at points considering where this team has gone, but it's also fun to remember the promise of what a player like Luka gave to all of us, and it's just something to look back on as this team continues to build and try to win a championship. It's been quite the ride, and anyway, I just wanted to share this show. I hope if you're in the United States, you have a happy Thanksgiving. If you're one of our overseas listeners, we appreciate your support. I will insert some ads somewhere in here. But I really just want to thank all of you once again for listening to our show, and I hope this is a fun look back. Have a good day. Go Mavs.
Hi, hello. Welcome to the fucking Mavs Moneyball podcast. This is Josh Bowe, one of the many editors over at MavsMoneyball.com. But who cares about that? Because I am with the one, the only, Mr. Kirk. Kirk, we did it.
We did it. Not only did we do it, we willed it. Because this was so unlikely as recently as 6 hours before the draft. I mean, we started to hear whispers of things. We started to read the tweets. You know, the one thing that many Mavs Moneyball people may not really get is that though we try to be as impartial as possible, we're really mostly fans. I mean, Josh has some sourcing if he really wants to, but I'm definitely just a dude on the Twitters. And so reading this stuff along the way it happened was just incredible. I nearly got killed by my wife because I started reading about how the Mavs were holding it up via Mark Stein's tweets, and all of a sudden I stopped talking at dinner, and that didn't go over well. So explain to me what happened with you, because you were actually at the Mavs draft party. I think the people would like to hear about that. So tell us about that, Josh. Where did it go?
It was a very interesting. It's false. It's always sounds more interesting. In reality, it's just a bunch of mostly sweaty white dudes sitting at tables looking at their phones. but no, it's always a good time because, you know, you get to catch up with people you haven't seen, if we don't see some writer friends or just friends in general, since the season ended. So that's fun to catch up. And then it was just a lot of staring at phones. You know, I think Tim McMahon was there. So he was actually, breaking some news. So he kind of was digging in a little bit. But everyone else that was there, isn't necessarily breaking too much news, because that's usually, left for Waj and Shams. But there was definite fist pumps when the tweets came out. It felt really good. Of course, I'm there, so I'm not like going nuts. Like if I was at my house, my pants would be off. I'd be running around the living room. I'd be pouring like champagne, down my balls or something. Like I'd be fucking going wild. But I'm there at the draft party, so I got to keep it like a little together, so I don't really celebrate that much. But in my head, I'm screaming because this is this is nuts. This is the best player in the draft, and the Mavs came in with the 5th pick, and they got him. They found a way. And Kirk, I think my favorite the comparison that you used, it was a while back, and you were like, this just needs to be like football in the NFL. Like when teams know that they need a quarterback, they find the quarterback they want and they get it. And usually it doesn't matter. Like they'll trade first round pick, second round pick. They'll trade all these picks because they're like, hey, it doesn't matter because we need this guy. Like this is our guy. If we don't get him, it doesn't matter what we make with all these other picks. So I really like that analogy. And I think that kind of was what happened tonight. Like the Mavs, they weren't going to take no for an answer. So it seemed like, at first it seemed like they did, because at first it seemed like they were going to let fucking Wes Matthews hold up the deal. But I think that was just the Mavs trying to look prideful and look like they were those smarter ones, and not Atlanta going, we don't want your trash ass Wes Matthews. But still, it just felt good that the Mavs took matters in their own hands and got clearly the best player in the draft, and could be one of the better players in the league for a long time.
It's funny. So we're at about, what pick are we at? So Josh and I are recording just before 11 p.m. Central, and the draft is probably got about maybe 4 picks to go. The Mavericks might have picked by now, and we're just not paying attention because they just recently made a trade for the 54th pick with Philadelphia in exchange for the 56th pick and the 60th pick.
Yeah, but, and those fucks didn't take Kevin Hervey.
I know. So maybe we'll be able to talk about that as it comes up. So essentially, what I am really excited about is I have been, and I went back and looked at this, and so it's been such a long time since we talked about this, because the Mavericks finished the year, they finished on a tanking streak. They also had this kind of incredible win-loss record in games decided by five points to give, which really, if we assume that games decided by 5 points are kind of coin tosses, the Mavericks lost far more than they won, to the point to where I think that a casual fan could look at the Dallas win-loss record and say, oh, they only won 24 games? Well, if you factor this in, they might have won 34, and with a little bit of improvement, we might win 40, yada, yada, yada. And so I went back and looked at this. The Mavericks lost 9 of their first 10 to start the 2017-18 regular season. I lost my mind between a game against Memphis, between the home and home series against Memphis, where Dallas finally won their first game, and apparently staked my claim, at least according to my Twitter feed, on Luka Doncic on the 27th of October, when the Mavericks were 1-5. So to come this far and to be right about something so stupidly specific really makes me feel good. I'm going to take a victory lap. I also looked through my Twitter feed, and I apparently have promised to name my second-born child, male or female, Luka. That's a discussion for a different day. But the fact that we're here is kind of incredible, because to give up the protections for the pick are very interesting. I think they're top 5 in 2019, top 3 in 2020, and unprotected in 2021 is really interesting, because I thinking long term, it's very important that the Mavericks, and really any team, has their own pick in 2021, because if the NBA decides to roll back their draft age limit restriction, there's a chance that both the seniors in the class of 2021 high school and the freshmen in the class of 2021 enter the draft at the same time, which gives you one of those really talent-rich drafts. So, like, Dallas got ahead of things, I think, a little bit, because with Luka, with Dirk, with Dennis, and with free agent X, whether it be I was sassing my Laker fan friends and saying Julius Randle, or even Boogie, which seems a little outside, if we're being honest. The Mavericks should win at least 35 games next year. So where we are right now, no free agency, the addition of Luka Doncic, Jalen Brunson, whoever the Mavericks have took with their final 2 picks, this is really, I can't think of a better outcome right now. Like, this is so exciting. And I know there's a lot of people out there who've not seen Luka who are very concerned about drafting a Euro. After all, the Mavericks have not had any success with European players. We're going to have a great time next season.
Yeah, it's bananas. I know that the ceiling talk is like whatever. Like, I just think he's going to be a good player. I think Rick made a good point in the post game. I think McMahon asked him about his athleticism and how it's going to translate, and Rick was like, "Well, I think he's going to surprise people." And then he's like, "Look at other players that have his skill level in the league that aren't necessarily, monsters jumping out of the gym. When you're that skilled," and this is a good point by Rick, and others have made it too. When you're that skilled, like, you create space. You get the defense moving. Like, you can make players move out of position with, when you're working passing angles, and when you're a good shooter, and when you can a good ball handler. So that's really exciting. Is just, I feel like he has such a high floor of being like, he's a good player because he's such a good passer. He's such a damn good passer. And that really, I think, limits like how much of a bust he could be. Like, when you're that good a passer, like he's bare minimum going to be like an acceptable NBA starter, I feel like. Do you want, before I keep going, do you want the second round news as the Mavs have?
Let's talk about that, and then we'll circle back in on the second round kind of later on in the podcast.
All right. So all right, we'll talk about second round later. All right. So, like, it's just crazy to me. And like you said, you've been on it since October. I kind of hopped in with you around then. I didn't even really think about him that much for most of the year because I thought he was consensus like, it felt like he was going to be the number 1 pick up until maybe February, when Ayton kind of kept going on a tear in conference play. So I really didn't, because I knew the Mavs weren't going to get the number 1 pick. So I didn't really think about him maybe until the last month, especially after they got the 5th pick. I thought there was no way. So this is just nuts to me. And I can't, like, I'm stunned. It's going to be so awesome watching Dennis Smith with these downhill drives off high screener rolls, and he's going to kick it out, scatter defense, and Doncic is so perfect for that secondary role. I mean, he'll be great as a lead guy too when Dennis is on the bench, or if they want Dennis to take a break and spot up a little bit. It's just incredible. Like, he just fits into every lineup. They got a wing. We don't have to worry about who's going to, like, they had Barnes and Wes Matthews and Dorian Finney-Smith. Like, no, they got Doncic now. Like, that's so legitimate. It's just crazy. I know there's a podcast, but I'm just, like, almost speechless about, like, how great this was for Dallas.
Absolutely. Because the thing that I kind of keep coming back to is that I have wanted Rick Carlisle to have multi-talented athletes available to him and not these single skilled guys. All right, so what do I mean by that? So I have always been very hard on Dwight Powell. I'm willing to admit, I've said so on Twitter, I've said so on our articles, that more or less I am wrong about Dwight Powell. He has lived up to his contract and more. He's been a valuable piece. However, he is also primarily a single-skilled guy. He's one of the best dive men in the league. You probably remember his statistics off the top of your head. but he's not great on defense. He's not a great rebounder. However, the Mavericks are able to survive because whenever they have him on the floor as the dive man, their offense is just bananas. So what do you do with a guy like Doncic, who has, if you look at his raw stats, his three-point shooting isn't great. I would argue that's primarily because this last season he was the primary guy at 19 for one of the best teams in the second best league in the world. So next year, if he's the third option, which seems reasonable, probably the fourth or fifth option if we're, factoring in depending who's on the floor, he's going to get better looks. He's going, both from outside and then from within inside the lane because the guy just knows how to play basketball. I think it's going to be one of these things where by around game 25, it becomes clear that while he might not be the quote, the best player on the floor, he's the guy that's drawing the most attention. Like there's so many opportunities for the Mavericks to be better around the margins that, every game is going to have to be must see, which, for a team that finished with 24 wins sounds stupid, but like this guy does incredible things. If you missed the shot in his, I don't even remember what the league title game was. He took a shot after being really terrible. Like I think he had only scored, single digits to date, but they were only up by 3 with about 2.5 minutes left. He took a combination Steve Nash runner floater step back jumper from the right wing that went in and gave his team a 6-point margin, which basically sealed the victory for him. I mean, the guy is a crazy shot maker. And even if he struggles to kind of adapt to the NBA levels of athleticism, which he may, he's still going to have these kind of flashes of absolute brilliance that make the Mavericks must-watch television.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of underrated aspect of like how great this is the Mavs have shitty TV ratings for like the last 5 years. I know DFW is a big market, and I don't want to get too inside baseball or like too far from the weeds of what matters, but like that's huge. Like he's going to put butts in the seats. He's going to get people excited. We saw that with Dennis. It felt like there was an energy around watching a guy that hasn't been there, since Dirk was in his prime. And, Dirk is still, obviously people love to watch him, but it's more of like a novelty, instead of like a raw excitement anymore with Dirk. So it's cool that, now you follow up, you kind of lured people back in that might've been kind of pushed away after those really meh playoff years, when they were getting bounced in the first round after 2011, and you bring people back with Dennis, you get them excited. And then, the Mavs kind of had a stinky year, so they kind of taper off. And now those people, you're bringing them back in. Now you're saying, now look who we're putting with Dennis. We're putting arguably the best player in this draft. Maybe one of the best players in the last couple of drafts. I mean, that might be taking it too far, but just like, it's just crazy what those two can do. And I know that there was some thought more nationally. I don't think people that watch them as really worried about it too much, but about how him and Dennis are going to fit together. And that's honestly, they're going to be almost a perfect pairing. I know Dennis is going to have to work on his off-ball game a little bit. He wasn't great when JJ was on the floor, and JJ was kind of pounding the air out of the ball. But I think Doncic is going to be he's going to move the ball a little bit more. Not that JJ Barrera was selfish, just JJ loved running pick and rolls over and over, and he's a good passer, but it's just kind of a different feel. I think Doncic is going to move the ball a little bit more, inspire more ball movement in general. And I think having those guys kind of not necessarily taking turns, but the weight of the offense is on neither of their shoulders. And when they're playing, they can feed off each other. They're both good passers. They're both good drive and kick guys. Doncic has the freaking LeBron James, that pass when he's coming off a screen and then maybe takes like 1 or 2 dribbles around the screen and then immediately one-handed fires it to the weak side corner for a 3-point shot that LeBron does all the time. Doncic has that pass, and like just being able to see that ball movement with Rick Carlisle's offense, like like Rick has been able to get some like acceptable offensive play from from like the most like unlikely sources. Like I know last year's Mavs won 24 games, but they had some good offensive games. They weren't like embarrassing in their games. And that's with Dennis playing with like Devin Harris and JJ Barea. And those were really the only playmakers he played with. Now you're putting him with like the ultimate, young playmaker. That's just crazy to me. And I'm not sure how good Doncic is going to be right away. And like you said, it might, once we're 25 games in, we're going to start to see it. But I just think his ability to pass is just going to be, regardless of his shot, regardless of his scoring, I think that passing is going to be evident immediately. And that's what's going to make him and Dennis be such a great pair, because Dennis's speed is so key. And Carl mentioned this afterwards that, when Doncic, where he's playing overseas, he didn't really have an athlete like Dennis in the backcourt that could just put a defense on its heels in a one-on-one situation. And that's just going to help him so much when he's spotting up, when he's moving off screens off the ball. He's going to be catching the ball against a scattered defense way more than he was when he was playing overseas. So that's really enticing. And and then another thing, I know I'm kind of rambling on, but another thing that's kind of underrated, I think he's going to make Barnes so much better. I think it's just fantastic that now, like, we don't have to worry about like, hey, is Barnes going to be a passer? Like that, that narrative that we've hated. I know you've hated too, especially whenever Barnes would get like 3 assists and we'd be like, oh, he's a passer now. Like, we don't have to worry about that anymore. Barnes can kind of just be who he is. He can keep getting better. Like, he's going to work his ass off to try to get better, but he doesn't have to try to be someone he's not and feel pressure to do that anymore, because Doncic is going to take some of that playmaking responsibility away from him, and he can just focus on spotting up, taking advantage of mismatches, things like that, playing, good, versatile defense. So that's kind of what excites me. Like, Kirk, I think one thing I've mentioned to you before, and you've talked about a lot, is like, when I watch these guys, I want to know, like, hey, are these guys going to get played off the floor in a playoff game? And that was like kind of the one nagging thing when we were looking at all these bigs like Bagley and Bamba, even Ayton and Jaren Jackson to a degree, although, maybe those guys not as much, but like, we don't have to worry about that anymore. We don't have to worry about if he fits, or like, oh, it's a wing. It's, bigs aren't in style because it's a wing league. Like, no, we don't have to worry about that shit. We got the best wing in the draft who might be the best player in the draft. And that's just so awesome. Like, it's so refreshing.
Well, there's a lot. I mean, you hit on so many points that I know.
I'm sorry. I fucking Johnny Fived that through that shit.
It's it's absolutely perfect. So let's talk about the X factor, which hasn't been mentioned near enough. One of the things that I believe allowed for Dennis Smith to have a very successful rookie season, no matter, I don't want to talk about long-term upside with him or anything else like that. Dennis had a successful rookie season in small part because of the gravity of Dirk Nowitzki. And Dirk, who we have since learned at the end of the season, he has had kind of a lingering ankle issue, which, I'm really interested to see his mobility next year. That's neither here nor there. But what do opposing teams do, at least on offense, if you have two really good initiators in Dennis Smith and Luka Doncic, two very good shot makers in Dirk Nowitzki and Harrison Barnes, and then whoever they decide to play at center, or if they decide to go small and then throw out a Wesley Matthews. There is really so many fun offensive options next year. And really, Dirk is kind of is almost like an AP course in terms of allowing NBA level talent to learn on the fly, because he's not always going to be there, but what he does is he allows for these guys to have 6 inches of space here and there that give them the opportunity to succeed. So what happens when you pair these two together is just going to be so interesting. And let's just play devil's advocate and say that neither player is great off the ball. I don't really recall at the moment how true that is of Doncic, but let's say it is true of Dennis. the fact that these two have to learn a specific skill set and, figure out how to make it work, I think is long-term great for both players, because Rick Carlisle is very good on offense, and the way that Dallas will play next year is just going to be a lot of fun. And I'm very excited to see where he goes from there.
Want to shop Walmart Black Friday deals first? Walmart Plus members get early access to our hottest deals. Join now and get 50% off a 1-year annual membership. Shop Black Friday deals first with Walmart Plus. See terms at walmartplus.com.
Whether you're ordering wings for the game, whipping up a 7-layer dip, or ordering pizza, there's something about football that makes you want to eat. And this football season, Uber Eats has the best deals on game day food. No matter what you're craving, from 2-for-1 pizza to buy one, get one wings, Uber Eats will be dropping new deals each week, all season long. Uber Eats, official on-demand delivery partner of the NFL. Order now. Terms and conditions apply. See app for details.
There's so many options and things to talk about with Dennis. The second thing that I wanted to ramble on myself is, let's take a step back and say, that Dennis, let's just assume that Doncic really struggles at the start, not because he's bad, but because the man is tired. In the last year and a half, he has played 150 professional basketball games. The NBA season's 82 games long before you get to the playoffs. Obviously, some overseas talent is not the same as playing in the NBA, but playing 150 sanctioned games or more in a year and a half is really a lot. So I expect, this summer to be very big for Doncic in terms of how he gets his body into shape, because there's been, a little bit of whispering about the fact that he likes some kind of questionable restaurants, which, like, who gives a shit about that? Like, he's 19 years old. I'm 34 years old, and I love Taco Bell. Sue me. So, if it takes him a little while to get into a little bit of a nutritional program and get into a weight program, he looks like this now. I can't imagine what he's going to be like if he's given the opportunity to play in an NBA system. So let's just anybody who's a little bit concerned, and there's probably a fair number of you out there because you've not seen tape about the man, just give him 60 games. Give him to the last quarter of the season. And if you're not sold by then you can tell me to go away. But I'm really convinced that Doncic's floor is so high with a team filled with smart basketball players. I know some of you out there might have wanted Mo Bamba, and Josh, I think you should talk about that a little bit. But this guy is gonna be something. He might not be a superstar. He might be the third best player on a championship team. He might be the second best player, but he's going to play for 12 to 14 years or more, and he's just going to be incredible. So why don't you take it from there, Josh?
Yeah. I guess with the Bamba stuff, I never want, I guess if we're just peeking back behind the curtain, and I watch about 3 hours of college basketball live, like during college basketball season. So this probably means bullshit, but my personal top 5 going into this, which is really all I paid too much attention to, because we've got much, much better people to pay attention to all the players that come after that. It was Doncic, it was Jackson, Ayton, then Bamba, then Bagley. So I know I was probably one of the bigger Bamba guys on the site, and maybe, but I still wanted Doncic more because I realized just what his versatility and what his skill set means, not just to the NBA in general, but especially to this team. And with Rick Carlisle and with Dirk, and working with those two legends of the league, it's just it just made sense as a perfect fit. But with Bamba, I still think centers matter, and the Mavs still need a center. They don't have a rim protector really on the roster, because I believe their best rim protector is Salah Mejri, and I'm pretty sure he's up. Nerlens Noel, as I like to say, is in the phantom zone, so we don't pay attention to him anymore. And so they need a rim protector really bad. That's not Dwight Powell. That's not really Dirk. That's not Maxi Kleber. So that's another area that they really need to address. So that's why at 5 I would have been okay with Bamba, because I still think the role of a rim running, rim protecting center is still a role that's valuable in the league today. Because Golden State might buck the trend, and they might have a 6'7" center that can step out to the 3-point line and make plays off the ball and make passes and play like a point guard and stuff like that. But not every team has Draymond Green. And furthermore, I don't know if there was a Draymond Green in this draft or if there was a Draymond Green in the last draft. I know centers are stepping out and starting to shoot threes more, but in terms of centers, teams playing 6-7 guys, you really didn't see a lot of that till the second round and the conference finals, when Houston was using PJ Tucker at center. So I kind of always thought it was putting the cart before the horse, worrying about if Bamba would get played off the floor in a second round playoff series. Because I'd be like, well, fuck, if Bamba helps lead us to a second round playoff series, isn't that kind of the point of getting a player like that and letting him help you win? So that was kind of my idea. But so I still think that's a need that they're going to need to address. And I think they're probably going to go big in free agency to address that. That's a little worrying, but that's kind of what was my thought process. But make no mistake, Doncic was always my number one guy, pretty much as soon as I picked up on him after Kirk, after you picked up on him. So that's kind of how I felt. That it's still a need, but I mean, I'm over the moon with kind of where they're at right now.
Well, with that, I think we should maybe pivot and discuss, even though you and I blindingly don't really know what we're talking about, let's talk about the second round selections in relation to what we know. So just to kind of recap with what's happened so far, with the 33rd pick, the Mavericks picked Jalen Brunson, who was the point guard of Villanova. I think he was like one of the national players of the year, just like a really, kind of a touted guy.
I think he averaged 18 a game.
Mm-hmm. We traded the 54th pick to the 76ers. They selected Shake Milton, which may be a whole other podcast for some of the guys who are really into SMU basketball. And we selected with the 56th and 56th pick, we selected a guy named Ray Spalding, a power forward out of Louisville. And with the 60th pick, we selected Kostas
Adetokumbo.
There we go. I may have been drinking Mavs fans. I don't want to butcher the man's names. He's a small forward out of Dayton. He's the Greek Freak's little brother. We may or may not have had the chance to pick him 4 or 5 years ago, but we're not going to talk about that right now. So Josh, I want to hear your immediate reactions to the second round, and then all of our good fans can tell us we're morons later.
Okay, here's my reaction to the second round, knowing that I've smitten about the first round, obviously. That sucked. I don't know much about these guys in the second round, but Jordan and Ian are draft guys on the site. I swear to God, they wrote 3 novels worth of articles about guys they liked in the second round. And with each of the 3 picks the Mavs had in the second round, they had a chance to get at least one of those guys. And they got none of those guys. They could have had Melvin Frazier. They could have had Mitchell Robinson. Melvin Frazier, a really nice, maybe potential 3-and-D wing out of Tulane, and Mitchell Robinson, who didn't play in college last year, but is Ian described as a 7-1 rim running monster, which kind of sounds like a useful thing the Mavs could use right now. So I'm not sure. And then they could have picked another Mavs Moneyball pet favorite and Shake Milton. And they didn't do that. They traded the picks from 54. And then they could have taken my boy. I graduated from UTA. They could have taken Kevin Hervey, who's a 6'7" forward who can shoot threes and has a 7'2" wingspan. But to be fair, he played at UTA. And then also, to be fair, he has had ACL surgery in each of his knees. So I would imagine maybe the Mavs' diligent training staff maybe did not give the okay on that one. So I'm not super thrilled. especially like I'm coming off the Doncic high and I'm like, oh shit, like we can get Melvin Frazier, like we're gonna get like every guy that we've been thirsting for the last like 3 months, and then they they kind of petered out a little bit after that. But I guess I can't get too mad because A, I don't know enough about these guys, and B, their 33rd pick, their first second round pick was one of the best players in college basketball last year on a title winning team. So even though I'm confused why the Mavs feel like they have to roll with 85 point guards on their roster every year, I can't blame them for being like, hey, this guy's 20 on our board. I know we've got the 85 point guards, but we have to, like, the value must have just made too much sense. And then Carlisle talked after that pick, and it really sounded like the interview won him over because he said one of the first things they asked him was like, hey, if we picked you, how are you going to get minutes on our team? Because you've got Dennis and you've got JJ. And, they didn't mention Yogi, interestingly enough. I know he's a free agent this year, but Carlisle didn't really mention Yogi during that. So that might be a hint at kind of what they're thinking with Yogi. And apparently Brunson's answer was like, well, I'm going to push Dennis as hard as I can to get minutes on the floor. And I'm going to try to not only make myself better, but, make Dennis better. And if he's slacking, I want to take advantage, and because I'm always going to bring it and stuff like that. And, no really hokey kind of coachy speak kind of stuff that you see in movies and generic quotes after games. But it was pretty clear from Carl, like that really swung them. I think the interview, they really like the head he has on his shoulders. So I think that, combined with the fact that while they do have backup point guards, one of them is JJ Barea, who's not going to be around for much longer, and the other one is a free agent this year. So maybe that was the thought process I can kind of get behind. So that's kind of where I was. And then the last two picks, I was just kind of being a homer with Kevin Hervey. I wanted him to be one of them. But I mean, they're the 56th and the 60th pick. I can't get too bad at what they did there.
Yeah, it's funny. So
Yeah.
let's start with Jalen Brunson. I don't know how to feel, but any player that gives Rick Carlisle the opportunity to run a 5-guard lineup, I suppose I have to support. What my immediate thought about the Dallas Mavericks draft is that the Summer League team is going to be lit.
Holy hell, yes.
I mean, let's just assume that Luka Doncic probably plays 2 games. If we look, just because the man's played 1 million hours of basketball, I don't really want him to be in Vegas just because he seems to like to have a good time, and that's a city where one can have a good time. Let's just, the next 3 players then are basically Jalen Brunson, and then, a pair of, it's not like they're overseas players who are getting stashed. So you're getting Kostas, and then you're getting Ray Spalding. And so these 3 guys in Summer League with paired probably, and this is me speaking entirely out of my rear end, somebody like Dorian Finney-Smith, who has just been looking to work on his shot. And then maybe even somebody like Kyle Collinsworth, who the Mavs signed him to the rest of the year, but he's like one of these intangible glue guys who seems to be able to do everything but make a basket. And the Mavericks Summer League team is just gonna be fun. I mean, we'll have a post at some point tomorrow about unrestricted free agents and or Summer League guys that the Mavericks need to pursue on MavsMoneyball.com. But there's just an incredible amount of, 8 to 15 in terms of guys on your NBA roster bench talent that the Mavericks really could, plug holes with. Like I don't want to call it an exciting time to be a Mavs fan because that seems a little hyperbolic. But if you're one of the hardcore basketball few who will watch a team as they are really struggling, you're going to get in on guys who are going to matter in the NBA in 2021 and 2022. Like, this is just, it's a lot of fun. And I don't want to say it's all that rewarding, because let's say the Mavericks top out at 37 wins next year, but they're building towards something. And we felt like this when they selected Dennis Smith last year during the draft, and I feel like it again following this draft, that the Mavericks know what they're doing. I'm going to try to stop being a whiner on Twitter, because these guys are professionals. I should stop, second guessing, but we're fans. And after tonight's draft, even though I know you don't like the specifics of the second round, with their building blocks alone, they have something, and it's something that they can market around, and that we can try to bring the more casual Mavs fans back into the fold about.
Right. And it's crazy how a lot of this, I know, the second round picks are nice. 3 second round picks is pretty nice for this team. And especially they seem to be all second round picks that, even if we don't agree, there were no Satnam Singhs or Bernard James type picks. It seems like some of these guys can at least play a little bit. Maybe not all of them will be on the roster, but they can at least play a little bit. But it's crazy how much Doncic really swings this. Like, if this were the same second round, but instead of Doncic, they got Bamba, like what would our tone, our tone would be completely different. We'd probably be like, all right, well, yeah, we could see this. And, I like Bamba. And like I said, we need a rim runner. We need a shot blocker. But man, they really need some playmaking. Man, they don't really have any wings. And man, what are they going to do with Harrison Barnes in 2 years? Because, he's really it for wings. Like, what are they, what's happening? There would have been still a lot of questions. And I feel like so many questions got at least partially answered tonight. And that makes me excited. Like, the fact that we don't have to worry about Harrison Barnes becoming a number 1 option playmaker anymore is just so refreshing, because it really was hard to talk about Harrison Barnes, because I think everyone on the site and everyone on Mavs Tour, I think we all love the guy just as a guy. He's just a good dude, and he is great in the locker room, and he's even better for the community. Just a great example of a guy to have on your team to show young guys what they need to aspire to, and then just to help a community that, needs it. But man, it was just so hard to talk about him as a player if we're assuming he is their primary wing and he is their trying to make him into a playmaker. And in 2 years, his contract's up, and that's dangerously close to Dennis's extension. And if they had Bamba, even if Bamba turned into the player that I imagine him to be, I'm not even talking about like 3-point shooting, just being a great defender and a great rim runner, that still doesn't really answer the question. It doesn't really take any pressure off Barnes, so to speak. If anything, it still puts more pressure on Barnes to alleviate some of that, playmaking pressure off of Dennis. And, that's just really nice. Like, that's just really nice. It just solves a lot of problems. It answers a lot of questions. It makes us not have to ask some difficult questions that can screw up team building. And, there's always, like, it felt like there was going to be a really big inflection point with Barnes when he's up in 2 years. And now it's still going to be a big deal. They need to make that the right decision there. But now with Doncic in fold, it doesn't feel like as big of a deal. And it feels like there's a foundation here where they can go in any direction now. They can get a 5. They can get a rim running 5 now. And we don't have to worry about the playmaking. Or they can shore up and get, some more wings behind Doncic. If they don't think Dorian Finney-Smith is the bench guy that they want, they can kind of go in any direction they want, because Doncic's just so damn versatile. He can pretty much play with anyone. So that's what's exciting to me. Is it feels like every headache we had about the Mavs for the last 4 months, it cleared up a lot of it for me.
Oh yeah. I mean, what is just so great now is that there's a sense of, I don't call it peace, because there's a lot that the Mavericks have to do. I believe Rick Carlisle referred to him as Luka Doncic as a foundational piece this evening. And when you have that foundation, everything else kind of happens from there. I am largely a person who worries about free agency just because the Mavericks have not been very good at it. And right now I'm at the point to where they could sign anyone from a Boogie Cousins to attempting to sign Julius Randle to even, just signing someone who fills the gap. I can't even think of any, kind of random free agent centers at the moment. I don't care.
What about Derek Favors, your
Yeah,
boy?
Derek Favors. Ooh, yeah, let's not talk about that. There's just a lot of options, and it's so nice to not have to wonder about all these pieces. And so, we're going to have a lot to say in the coming weeks. So it's June 22nd. Training camp, I would guess, starts in mid-August, because the NBA season, though we're all used to it starting in November, actually starts mid-October. We're going to have a lot to say in the coming weeks. There's going to be a ton of summer league content. There's going to be a ton of overreactions. There's going to be a ton of free agency stuff. And hopefully there's going to be a ton of podcasts. And so, you and I are probably going to revisit this over the summer, but there's just a whole lot of things that give Mavericks fans, even your casual Mavericks fan, your Mavericks fan who gets tired of the Cowboys being garbage once they've lost 8 games, we're going to be here for you. So over the next, couple of days, I want you to think about this. We're going to have a social media reactions post in the morning, because the fact that the Mavericks traded into this pick prompted some absolutely ludicrous responses from both fans and foes alike. I want to say the Rockets SB Nation blog just had a great thought. We're going to have, a quote board from all the various people who spoke tonight. We're probably going to, you should tune in to our good friends at Locked On Mavericks. Nick and Isaac are going to be out there. There's Josh, I think, God, it's almost, 12:30 my time. I'm on the East Coast. You're going to try to churn out a column. We're going to have a lot of stuff over the next several days. And I really think that everyone who is even kind of remotely interested, and God, if you subscribe to this podcast and you're on minute 44, you should definitely count yourself as a faithful Mavs fan. That's kind of what I think. We're going to have a lot of stuff to say. We want to hear back from you. Just know that we read all of your comments. We read all of your tweets. We're a pretty small community right now, and those of you who support us are really important to us, even if we're occasionally sassy to you. So thank you for hanging with us this long the night after the Mavs. I'm looking forward to what the future brings. What about you, Josh?
Yeah, it's just nice that we're excited. I felt like we were talking like 3 days ago about like, man, this roster fucking sucks. Like, we're just like looking at it. I wrote a column that kind of a couple of days ago that highlighted the top 10 Mavericks in minutes played last year. And I just stared a hole at that for like 5 minutes when I was writing that, like going, Jesus, like what? Like, this is going to take some time, and it might still take some time, but now there's more energy around it, so that it's going to be a more exciting road to get there. And also, I really like our new catchphrase that you just coined, Kirk, Mavs Moneyball. When the Cowboys are garbage, we're here for you. So let's put that on the masthead. Let's copyright that shit. Put it on a t-shirt, put it on a mug or some shit. You got it, and we'll roll that out sometime in the future. But yeah, tonight was fun, and like you said, it's going to be now it's almost like the rest of it begins, like the real part begins, where we get to dissect it. We get to all watch Luka clips until 5 a.m. or watch Luka clips instead of work, or think about all this stuff, which honestly, as much as I would have been okay with Mo Bamba, that was not happening if they picked Bamba at 5. I don't think we would have been like revolting, but it's just so cool to have this energy. It feels like we won the number 1 pick in the lottery tonight, but instead we traded up and just kind of got that player instead. So it's just a cool feeling. We needed a shot in the arm. Dennis was a good start, but they definitely needed another one to kind of get us going through these last couple of blah years.
Well, before we get out of here, tell the good people, whether they've come to our website, mavsmoneyball.com, what do they need to do to subscribe to our I don't know, tri-monthly podcast. I don't know. We try to get up an episode. You try to get up an episode probably at least once a week. So what do they need to do to subscribe?
Well, if you're listening to this in the post on the site, we'll have the post on the site, and I'll embed all of the buttons to click to subscribe. We're on just about every major podcasting service now. If you're not listening to us there, if you're just listening to us on the web, you can listen to us through iTunes, through the Apple Podcasts app, through Google Podcasts, through Pocket Casts, through Stitcher. And I think there's a couple other ones that I can't remember off the top of my head, but those are the big ones. So if you guys want to subscribe, if you're listening on the web, there'll be buttons embedded below. So go ahead and subscribe. We'll keep it rolling. I'm going to try to get Jonathan Sharks from The Ringer on in the next couple of weeks. I've got another kind of semi-blast from the Mavs blogging past that I'm trying to line up. Connor Hutchison.
Ooh, yeah, Connor, my dude.
Yeah. If you're listening to this podcast, maybe you read the 2-man game when Connor was there. You read the classical when he was there. He kind of crept back into the shadows a little bit in terms of basket blogging, but he reached out to me this week and he wants to jump on because he's excited as hell. So everyone wants to talk about the Mavs now. Who would have thought? So let's just keep it rolling.
All right. Thanks for having me on, Josh.
Yeah. Thank you for staying up till 12:40. Thank you for making it through a couple more cocktails podcast with me tonight. So with that, Kirk, thank you. We'll talk again soon on here. And this is the Mavs Moneyball podcast. We will see you next time.